This week on Wild Talk, we dive deep into the upcoming fall election in British Columbia. Joining me are Mark Hall from Blood Origins Canada and Kyle Stelter from the Wild Sheep Society of BC. We discuss why it's crucial for hunters and conservationists to make their voices heard. We're crashing that aircraft that you drew the picture of, and we're doing absolutely nothing. We've also got an exciting segment featuring Hodag, and then our friend Kate Rundle will share her latest insights in our social segment.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Aventura, Timber Stove, Hornady, and Wild TV Plus.
We are back with more Wild Talk. I'm your host, Steve Hamilton.
We are back at it for another social segment on Wild Talk.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Wild Talk again. This is going to be a fun episode. I say that all the time, and I'm kind of biased with this one because I got a really good friend of mine, brother from another mother. I've known Kyle for, going on 10 years now. And we're buddies. We're co-workers. We're partners in conservation. And I'm going to keep pumping your tires if you don't stop me, Kyle. So
no, I'll just sit here and listen. Just keep going, buddy. But you know what I will say is that, I feel like we've been at the coalface, and I know lots of other hunters too in BC here, because we care about wildlife, we care about conservation. We've been shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of other people. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's just you and I doing it, but and I think that's our common ground. And we've built this friendship based on a common love for wildlife and conservation.
Who are you, and how did you get to your current role with the Wild Sheep Society of BC?
Yeah, awesome, dude. Well, first of all, I felt like my mom was doing that introduction, so that was pretty cool. Love that. I grew up a hunter. Professionally, I ended up in BC here. Sort of took a little hiatus from the hunting side of things, and certainly not doing much on the conservation work. And then, 15, 20 years ago, I sort of became familiar with the Wild Sheep Society BC. I was doing some hunting. A lot of times I'd go back to Alberta and hunt with friends and family there, and never really did anything in BC. And then a colleague at work said, "Hey, let's go and do some sheep hunting." And I'm like, "What's involved with that?" And he goes, "Don't worry, I'll teach you everything you need to know." And so that was kind of the bait that set the hook, and never looked back since. So got involved with the society, I guess because I went on that first sheep hunt, and he said, "Well, if you're gonna," and he bought me a 1-year membership to the society and said, "You got to be a member if you're gonna sheep hunt." So I had that membership, and then just a group of people that I connect with. And the society's a little different. We, people look at us differently, good and bad, I think. And I certainly see the good, but for me, it's about the work we do as a community for conservation and wild sheep and other species. You point that out all the time, Steve. It's not just the sheep we're helping. That's our mission. But man, we help elk, we help bison, we help all kinds of other species as well. So yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people get the misconception. They hear Wild Sheep Society and they assume that it's just sheep. But the great work the organization does, like the burns, for example, which we can get into a little bit later, that benefits anything on the landscape. You were president of the society for a few years there first, weren't you?
Yeah, so I got involved, and actually my gateway to the society was through the Jurassic Classic. That was kind of my first volunteer opportunity, and there was a vision to go fish for sturgeon and raise money for wild sheep, which is, fishing for one resource to support another. A little controversial, actually, and one of the organizations that supported initially pulled out because they were like, yeah, this doesn't add up. If you're fishing for sturgeon, you should be helping sturgeon. Well, clearly we help sturgeon because we put 60 anglers on the river that buy tags, and they're out there tagging. They're investing in the resource, and of course we make the some donations to the sturgeon as well. So I feel like we're supporting the resource, but we also do the bulk of the fundraising that help wild sheep and other resources as well. So I think that's really cool. That was my gateway in there, and as a volunteer, and I got on the board of directors through that, was involved. And after my first year, there was a sort of a leadership vacancy, and they're like, "We need someone to be president." I'm like, "Well, that's not me, because I'm brand new here." And they're like, no, you'll be fine. We'll help you. So closed my eyes and jumped in with both feet. And that was a lot of fun. We were growing as an organization, and I think people were buying into what we're doing because, like you said, Steve, I feel like that the one thing that sets the society apart from a lot of other organizations, not all other organizations, is our boots on the ground, our commitment to conservation and investing, like real dollars, like not just taking members' funds and doing other things with them. We're actually doing it and we're telling about it. So I feel like that was so the over the past 10 years, we've seen a lot of growth, and I think people believe in the mission and what we're doing, and we're showing them what we're doing. We're telling the story, investing in wildlife and conservation, wild sheep.
What is the Wild Sheep Society of BC and its primary mission? How was it created?
Yeah, so it dates back to early 1990s, and effectively the Fraser River Bighorns is sort of the heart of where things started to come together for, I guess, the society. And there was a bunch of sportsmen and sportswomen that were concerned. They were seeing declines in bighorns on the Fraser. So the bighorn meta population roughly had 2,400 bighorns in its sort of prime. And in the, I guess, late 80s, it probably started to happen, but it manifested itself in the 90s. And there was precipitous declines in the bighorn population. So there was a survey done in 2020, and there was roughly 800 bighorns. So compared to 2,400, so 60 to 70% die off. And that's when people said, hey, something is really wrong here. Nobody really knew what. They were just like, something's going on. We're not killing them. It's not hunters that's causing that decline. Is it predation? But that wasn't really obvious. But there just wasn't a lot of sheep. And so a number of dedicated sportsmen and women came together, and that was the inception of the Wild Sheep Society BC. The mission was to look after British Columbia's wild sheep and their landscape, or their habitat is what I guess our slogan says. So that's the mandate, is to look after wild sheep and their habitat, and that's kind of the focus of what we do now. Of course, as you know, we've talked about this before, you and I, is there's 4 subspecies of wild sheep across the province. We have Dall sheep in the northwest corner. In northern BC, we have stone sheep, and then we have 2 subspecies of bighorns with Rockies and California. And we're a provincial organization. We look after all of them.
We kind of touched on a little bit of project work there, but let's really dig into some of the key programs and initiatives the society is currently focused on.
Yeah, I think the thing for me, Steve, is our organization focuses on the groundwork, and it's not, the studies are important, don't get me wrong, and we invest in studies, and we have MyTax students that we're investing in. But we really feel like our members' dollars need to be invested. And there's a real immediate need for habitat work. And for anyone that's not really into the sheep world, we really struggle in the sheep world, unlike many other species, with the disease issue. So there's a number of diseases that affect wild sheep, and obviously all wildlife can have disease. But probably the biggest issue that we struggle with in British Columbia right now is disease-related issues. And then effectively, the most common one is called, and forgive me for getting scientific on you, Mycoplasma ovi pneumonia, or MOV. And that's basically a disease that it can be fatal in wild sheep. And that was one of the reasons I mentioned earlier about the Fraser River ecosystem, where we went from 2,400 to 800. And the direct cause of that was primarily caused by this disease called MOV.
Fraser River Project is a test and remove program for bighorn sheep that are infected with MOV.
It's the most significant conservation concern in wild sheep across North America.
Coming off our nose here now, Chris.
A typical capture project, you're targeting maybe 5 or 10% of a population. This one, the first 2 days, we catch 80% of our targeted sheep.
We're making a difference. We're making a tangible difference to these bighorn sheep.
It's working, there's no doubt about it.
So that's something that we've been investing heavily in, but we also focus really on landscape enhancements. So controlled burns, prescribed burns in northern BC. Our 24-25 budget is $770,000 for prescribed burns. So obviously it's a heavy lift. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's on the ground project, boots on the ground, where we're actually going to see a difference for wild sheep populations. So that's one of our keystone projects right now. And another one, like I said, that we're heavily invested in and focused on is the Fraser River Test and Remove. And that's a podcast in itself, so I won't get into the nuances.
You mentioned $700,000 on the ground for burns this year alone, and we got 1,500, 1,200 members. That's an impressive amount of money on the ground raised by that small a membership. Where does that kind of money come from? Like, what kind of sponsors, donors, and what's your fundraising look like?
Yeah, it's phenomenal, Stephen. It's just, it blows my mind. So if you do the math, last year the society alone, our dollars alone, we put $630,000 on the ground. So that's the society's dollars. But we partnered with a whole bunch of other organizations, sponsors, donors, charitable organizations to at least double that. So it was well over $1 million that was directly allocated from our coffers with our partnership. So if you do the math on that, roughly 1,500 members, that's about $420 per member that we're putting on the ground for conservation. And this isn't other projects. It's not advocacy or anything like that. These are actually on the ground projects. So it's something our members are dedicated to.
But we have an election coming up in probably less than a month by the time this comes out there. So being in British Columbia, what are the main drivers you feel that should be front of mind for anybody going to the polls this October? And when I say anybody, I mean anybody that has the privilege to vote.
Yeah, I think it's more important than ever that we get out and vote. And as a society, we're nonpartisan, so we're not going to endorse any political party, as you know. But it's really important that as I guess voters, we need to educate ourselves on who's going to look after what's important to us. And there's things that are happening out there that we need to make sure that we have our eye on the ball and that we're supporting the candidates that are going to look after the issues that are important to us. So one of the major issues, and actually for anyone that's interested, we have a government engagement committee. And if you go to our website, it's wildsheepsociety.com/get involved. And there's a 2-pager there. And basically gives you an overview of how you can get involved, what you can do more of. And hey, we're not the only ones that do it. There's other organizations that are advocating for this stuff too. So, you don't have to use our song sheet if you don't want to, but use someone's song sheet and get involved. So go and meet with, and Steve, you're that guy. You are the person that will go talk to the candidates. You and I talk about that. I'm the same person. I'll go and talk to the candidates. I'll find out who's going to look after the things that are important to me. And I try and get some promises. Like, if you're elected, what are you willing to do? And okay, well, I'm going to hold you to account on that. And, without question, we've seen it in BC is that we're falling behind rapidly in other jurisdictions with investment in wildlife. And, it used to be beautiful BC, and they talked about the Serengeti of the North. And, there's a precipitous decline in many cases in wildlife, and it's because of, I don't know if mismanagement's the proper word, but it probably is. Truth be told,
it's the right word. I'll say it's the right word.
I feel strong. I know you do too. Is like, go out, get involved, and find out who's running. And there's town halls and there's opportunity to meet with candidates, and it's easy to do. Like, this is the time they want your vote, right? They're pining for your vote, and they're probably going to tell you things that maybe they're not going to be able to deliver in, but that's okay. At least they're, you got a starting point. And then if they said something pre-election, they get elected, now you can hold them accountable. Again, look at candidates that are going to support the things that matter to you. And it's federal, it's provincial. It's provincial now. We're going to talk about that because of October 19th, but we know we're going to have an election between now and October of next year, probably sooner, as we all know. And, wildlife is typically a provincial issue, but there's things that are federal too that we need to have our eye on the ball on as well.
I believe it's 15 times over the last 60 years or whatever it is that there's been a promise to increase funding to fish, wildlife, and habitat. And that works out to once every 4 years when it comes to an election. We talked a lot about politics. We talked a lot about the great work the society does, but someone wants to become a sheep hunter. If you could give them 3 or 4 quick tips, what would that be?
Well, first of all, just do it, right? So many people are just apathetic. They sit back and, you show up. The cool thing about sheep hunting is everyone's like, oh, you got to have all this gear and you got to do this and you got to do that. Actually, you got to buy a license and you got to get out in the field. Like that's really what you have to do. Now, that said, you probably should get a little bit educated. And honestly, the best thing to do, and as you know, Steve, is mentorship, right? Like if you, just like anything else, where do you go for mentorship? Well, this is the pitch to join the society. Thanks for setting me up for that. But come to the Mountain Hunting Expo and honestly, come to our fundraisers. That's where I went. People are incredibly generous when you come to these shows because you're all like-minded. You feed somebody a couple of whiskeys, and next thing you know, they're telling you where to go on the mountain. And again, that's maybe a bit nefarious, but really at the end of the day, it's building this network of people, this mentorship opportunity. There's people that are always looking for sheep hunting partners. But really just getting involved, and just like people are like, oh, I have to have all this gear and all this stuff. And like, no, you don't really. Like the key takeaway there is it is an apex hunt. So it's a bit more challenging than average, but most anyone can do it, I would say. Finding a sheep hunting partner. So that's one. One thing with sheep that's a bit unique, but really it's not, is horn aging, and there's very strict regulations, and it's a bit more challenging. It's kind of like when you're goat hunting and they want you to shoot a billy, right? So you have to educate yourself on how to do that, and it's not quite as easy as one thinks. So you have to educate yourself on that aspect of it. So again, attending a sheep horn aging course, and the society, we ran 4 or 5 of them this past year. Yeah, just get involved, show up, and don't be afraid to do it, and don't feel like, oh, I don't have this camo pattern, I didn't buy like this expensive rifle. That's like, yeah, you got to be safe and smart, of course, but if you got the safety gear and the basics, like you don't need to have the best camo or the nicest firearm to go sheep hunting.
So as we finish up here, I'm going to kind of throw a couple of curveballs at you. Whitetail or mule deer?
Oh, my goodness. Dude, that is the hardest. So big mule deer are the hardest. Mule deer. Mule deer. Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite Scotch?
I got my Blue Bunch sitting here. So the Wild Sheep brand of whiskeys. But okay. Oh, dude, you really set me up. I'll go with Dalmore. It's not the most expensive, but it's just, I'll go Dalmore.
Good choice. Good choice. A little smoky there, but I'm not a huge smoky guy, but we're good. Doll, sheep, or stones?
Oh, dude, all these things, all of them. I want them all. I guess probably stones. I guess, yeah, stones.
Even after last year's, nice.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've got one of each, but stones are just so iconic, and we have such a beautiful opportunity in BC to hunt them yearly here. That's a privilege as a sheep hunter and as a hunter. I just cherish. We're so lucky.
And we're the only place in the world where you can get all four sheep in one area too, right?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. I'm very lucky.
How does one become involved with society?
Yeah, so wildsheepsociety.com, and just go to the homepage. You'll figure it out pretty easily from there. But the cool thing right now, Steve, is we do have a membership promotion going on. It's called our Drive to 2000. We've teamed up with our conservation partners, and we're really grateful because Wild TV is one of our conservation partners. So they're supporting the conservation work that we do. Again, a reason why I have so much respect for Wild TV is they put their money where their mouth is. They invest in conservation. They invest in wildlife. They've done some things that are really impactful for me, and I won't go into the details, but they've released statements around certain things that matter to me deeply and things that I respect the organization for. So start with a membership. It's cheap. It's $60 for a year. It's a little bit more, but we feel like there's some value there. And hey, you get a chance. It's one chance to win $10,000 in prizes through our membership promotion. That runs till October 26th.
Yeah. Difference is those your membership dollars go on the ground, as Kyle talked about. $700,000 this year alone. That's unheard of by any organization. It's untouchable. And the only organizations that do that to those sort of numbers are the sheep organizations. So Kyle, I can't thank you for your time enough, brother. Do it again. And this is open invitation to you to come on here anytime, and hope to talk to you soon. I love what you're doing. Can't say that enough. So thanks for joining me today.
Amazing, brother. Thanks. Wild Talk is awesome. Love it. Love what you guys are doing. Love Wild TV, and appreciate you having me. Thank you for all you do, man.
Joined by the guys from Hodag Outdoors, Jeremy, Scott, and for this segment, we got Ryan Kohler, president of Wild TV. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you for having us.
I'm just going to sit back and throw the questions at you guys and kind of make this a campfire conversation if you guys are cool with it. So I've learned a ton about Hodag from my last conversations with Jeremy and Scott, but I want to hear from somebody like yourself, Ryan, who has used these products in the field. I've I've followed your Instagram for a while now, and I've seen some amazing footage. So I know you're a big user. So what's your experience been like with these things?
Well, I think the first thing I would say would be like the fun factor. The fun factor is huge, right? So there's a reason to go outside and goof around with whitetails. There's a reason to try to get big whitetails to come into an area. You've got basically, I call them toys you can use to get photos with. So when you go outside and you start using, whether it's the hemp scent rope, the licking stick, or the licking branch, and pictures start coming back, it's really rewarding. So that'd be the first thing I would say is it's super fun to use them to go outside. It's rewarding to get pictures. You feel like you've achieved something, right? You built something in the woods and a deer went and hit it or touched it or played with it. So right away you're like, okay, this is awesome. It's way more fun, I suppose, right? So in the past, like in Alberta, for example, we would use scrapes. You go out there and you try and find scrapes, put cameras on them. But now I can do so much more, right? Like you've got the licking stick that we've used and the deer play with the licking stick, or the hemp scent ropes. The ropes for me are really fun because the ropes that I've put out, the deer have annihilated them. I've got photos and videos of deer taking their rope and just like completely tearing it completely apart. Like the horns are covered, the rope's stuck in their horns, and they've thrashed them. So everything that I've used so far, and I've got one season under my belt using the stuff, and I can't wait to get to like 3 and 4 and 5, because with whitetails, you're learning all the time and it's always changing. And so as far as the products go, it's super exciting to use them.
So talk to me about the hemp scent rope. Like that's not something I immediately am drawn to when I think of deer hunting itself. So explain a little bit about the rope to me.
The idea with the hemp is the hemp ropes. We like vines are something that people talk about today with scent marking a lot. And Scott and I have both experimented with it. And I have farms that have them on it, and I have some farms that don't have them on it. And what we found is, like in nature, if the vine hangs down perfectly, you do find deer use it. They'll use them as scent marking, but very few spots that they're perfect, And so what we realized is, and the hemp, the story behind the hemp part of it is like, we've got another brand that's this dog brand. And years ago, we're talking 15 years ago, we had some products that were made with big, heavy hemp rope. And hemp is as close to a natural compound as you're going to find. Like it's a fibrous material that is natural. And so it's not man-made. There's no chemicals in it. It's as close to like what you're going to find in the wild.
I found that, like, because we don't have vines in Canada, they've never seen ropes,
Sure.
Right? Like they've never seen it. So for us, or for me here, it was like a scent checking rope.
I say one of the surprises for me, Ryan, too, was they use them year round.
Yeah, we learned that last year too. We put them out in September, and the deer I killed last year, this big, heavy, huge 6x7 or something, like it started coming through the scrape and hitting the scrape early in September.
Like I don't have very big acreage that I live on, and I'm right behind my house, and I've got licking sticks, I've got ropes, and I've got licking branches. And I don't have a big enough property that the bucks live there, but I've got a couple does that live there and fawn there every year, and we watch them out the back window, and I know they're there. I know they live. That's their home. That's very much their home range. But what I do is I put them out. I have these, the licking stick, the licking branch, and the ropes on this 20 acres. And I'll get those same 2 does, and I'll get their fawns, and they're playing with it, and they're scent marking it all summer long. It's usually, by me, it's about October 15th. I start to get the first buck that comes, and I don't see them all year, but as soon as that time window, and it's usually within a week, I get the first buck to come and check them. And then within a matter of about 3 to 4 weeks, I'll have 15, 20 different bucks that come through. They only come through during that window. But I know why they're doing it is because they're checking on those 2 does. As a small business, for Scott and I, it's the biggest highlight we get, and we get it a lot in the fall, is people will send us pictures of deer that they shot over one of our products. And it's like we've had pictures of kids that have killed deer during the youth hunt over our products, and it's like that's the most satisfying thing that we can see.
I think that's a great way to end it there, guys. Ryan, thanks for giving some great info on these. You sold me on it. And Jeremy and Scott, it's been an absolute blast learning a ton from you guys. So you guys have a good day, and we'll chat soon.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kate from Wild TV, back at it for another social segment here on Wild Talk with Ghost.
Jeff and I are watching scary movies. Yeah, you don't really want to watch.
This is the life-size elk carving that I did, and this is what it looks like now. We thought it was vandalized. Upon closer look, you can see that the elk sculpture has a piece of antler in its knee. The elk fought my sculpture, and the elk won. I guess that's nature's ultimate compliment. My elk was knocked over by another elk, and it had 5 bags of cement anchoring it down. It's crazy.
Alrighty, everybody, that's a wrap for this week's social segment. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back for more on Wild Talk.
All right, and we're back with more Wild Talk. I'm joined by Mark Hall from Blood Origins Canada, formerly known as the Hunter Conservationist. Mark, it's been a hell of a long time since you and I have had a chance to sit down and chat. So thanks for joining me today. How you doing?
Yeah, awesome. It's great to be here. Like you said, yeah, it's been a long time, other than a few texts here and there. So
yeah, it's you and I go back probably a decade or so now, and we came together for the mutual love of our outdoor spaces, hunting, fishing, wildlife, and basically the lack of action that we're seeing on the landscape from our elected officials and wildlife management in general. So let's dig right into the big one right now. You were known as the Hunter Conservationist for years, absolutely years. That's how you built a brand, and that's how everybody knew you. And then in the last year or so, you kind of transitioned with Blood Origins Canada. Kind of elaborate a little bit on that, if you don't mind.
Curtis and I started out with the podcast, with the brand, The Hunter Conservationist. Then about a year and a half ago, Robbie Kroger from Blood Origins approached me with a proposition to become the face of Blood Origins Canada. So it was a no-brainer for us. The business world is really good at knowing that when you need to grow, you do it by mergers. Brands, companies, whatever, you grow exponentially. And here is an opportunity where he's recognized worldwide. He's got resources behind him, people behind him, and our opportunity to go from here to like here, as opposed to just kind of like slowly trying to chug away as the Hunter Conservationist. It was a no-brainer, and great team to work for, great people to work for. So we actually, like Robbie and I, have actually formed Blood Origins Canada Foundation. It is a registered non-profit charity in Canada, separate from Blood Origins. So it's like the chapter, the affiliate thing as he grows worldwide. The Hunter Conservationist brand still stands because that is still the flagship podcast. The Hunter Conservationist podcast is the flagship podcast for Blood Origins Canada now. So
let's start high level before we really dig deep into the meat of the issue. And in your view, Blood Origins Canada, what are the top priorities in British Columbia right now for hunting and wildlife management?
Nationwide, there's trends, and the thread that connects just about all the provinces and territories is wildlife is not a priority, and governments are not dedicating funding, resources, staff, research, everything that needs to go into, having a world-class, second largest country of the world. We have species of animals in this country that they're the only populations found in the world, stone sheep, for example. That is a global responsibility to look after and steward that wildlife. We're a big player globally for polar bears, those sorts of things. And yeah, I think the common thread is governments are not prioritizing conservation, taking care of the environment, and taking care of fish, wildlife, and habitat. And this is a whole separate podcast, but I probably think the biggest issue that ties into that as well is this nation needs to figure out how to get the different hunting interests and rights holders in this country together and streamline towards working for wildlife and conservation. And that's reconciling First Nations, Métis harvesters with non-Indigenous harvesters in this province. We're seeing province by province by province conflicts over who should hunt, who gets what, especially when a population is declining, who gets to kill the last moose kind of thing. And whole other can of worms there, but I think that is a national priority as well in this country.
It sure is. And it's been said for years in our circles is, why are we fighting over the last piece of pie when we should all come together and bake a new pie that everybody can share from? While we're talking about policy changes, let's get into the fun one. What's one of the main ones that you'd like to speak about?
In the spirit of an election coming up in the province in October, let's go back 8 years to when we were facing an election in the province, and the NDP party, not government, the party, made an election promise that if they were to get elected, they were going to ban grizzly bear hunting. And that caused kind of a big flurry. The Grizzly Bear Foundation was born. They went on this big tour of the province saying we're having a commission on grizzly bear management and conservation. People thought they somehow had power to make decisions. I was the very first speaker at the very first conference in Cranbrook. Dust all settled. It just turned out to be a organization that was rallying the anti-hunting, anti-grizzly bear hunting troops in the province to then give the government, the incoming government, the NDP, more ammunition to make the decision to ban the hunt. That was a huge policy change, and that was 8 years ago. This is why I'm advocating for people, regardless of how frustrated you are or how bleak you think the future is in hunting, you have to get out and vote, because there was enough hunters in 2016 to have prevented that policy change on the grizzly bear hunt. I literally saw today on the BC NDP Instagram account or their Twitter account, whichever it was, asking people to sign a petition, which I don't quite understand when you're the government. Why would you sign a petition to ensure that the Conservative Party doesn't get elected because they may bring back the grizzly bear hunt? So we're right back where we were 8 years ago on that policy front. They're basically, saying, hey, hunters are bad people. We don't want a trophy hunt. If you change governments, you could end up with trophy hunting of grizzly bears. It's a bit of fear mongering that's already happening. And if you want to prevent that as a voter in the province, or maybe if you want to reinforce the ban staying in place, it's up to you, and people feel differently about it. But your voice is going to make a big difference this time around as well on the grizzly bear and the future of grizzly bear hunting. So,
right. I'll never forget that the former premier from the NDP, John Horgan, when they got in, he had this sappy music that played behind him, and it said, "It's time to close the grizzly bear trophy hunt in British Columbia."
It's time to end the grizzly bear trophy hunt in BC. It's something British Columbians agree on because it's the right thing to do. We have a proud outdoor heritage that includes hunting and fishing. And we have a booming ecotourism industry. We welcome the world to enjoy our spectacular scenery and wildlife, and it creates jobs throughout our province. We could create even more jobs and welcome many more guests by ending the grizzly bear trophy hunt, and that's something I pledge to do.
And everybody bought into it. And hunters, for some reason, they didn't get engaged. And as you used to say in one of your speeches, get angry. They didn't get off their asses and engage on this public forum. We were outweighed by 4 or 5 to 1. And that's pretty disappointing considering there was less than 5,000 total responses to this open forum. At 110,000 licensed hunters in British Columbia alone. If even half of us showed up, we would have absolutely destroyed that public forum and showed them that we cared more about management of wildlife. And it scares me. We've got, as you said, an election coming up at this time of recording in just over a month, in mid-October, and there's so much on the table. We've watched the last 2 years specifically of them closing sheep hunts, closing moose hunts, closing caribou hunts, and we're crashing that aircraft that you drew the picture of, and we're doing absolutely nothing to prevent it as hunters.
Exactly, and we've kind of, over the last 8 years moved away from science-based wildlife management and the regulation of hunting to sort of like a social way of managing hunting. Does it feel good to the voter base? Does it look good on the news? That's sort of how we're approaching wildlife management. But I think the bottom line in BC is things are not headed in a good direction for hunting or for conservation. And I think that's an important thing. If you're not a hunter, oh, you guys are only thinking of hunting, you're only thinking of hunting. No. So keep in mind, British Columbia has more endangered species, plants, insects, fish, marine and terrestrial, mammals, birds, reptiles, than the rest of Canada put together.
Yeah.
One of the election promises 8 years ago, beside the grizzly bear hunt ban, was a provincial endangered species legislation, and that never happened. So we're actually losing wildlife. We're losing wildlife habitat that aren't even species that are huntable, but they're a concern to all of us that care about wildlife.
I think you make a great point there, that this is bigger than hunting. This is bigger than fishing. This is bigger than sport shooting. This is about wildlife and habitat as a whole. And with what's gone on in British Columbia the last 2 weeks, specifically with one of the parties pulling out completely, and and I mean a lot of these incumbents have decided that they're not going to run again, there's going to be a lot of new relationships to build. No matter who gets in, there's going to be a lot. We're starting square one. So we all need to go in. This is our chance to essentially shape whatever government comes in and say, hey, fish wildlife habitat needs to be a priority. This is why. And we're going to hold you accountable to it. You work for us. We have put you in there. And in 4 years, we can take you out, so to speak, right? We can fire you if you don't make wildlife a priority.
40 years ago, BC was dedicating 0.6% of its total provincial budget to taking care of fish, wildlife, and the land. And now it's an order of magnitude lower than that. Yet the province has a larger budget than it did 40 years ago, proportionally spending less and less and less on taking care of the land. That's all part and parcel of getting out and voting and then making wildlife and conservation a priority after the election.
I don't think we could stress it enough. You need to exercise your right to vote if you care about being on the landscape as a whole. So let's pivot to about public perception of hunting. we kind of dug into it a little bit, but how do you feel that public perception influences wildlife management?
It's influencing it more and more all over the world. There are a lot of organizations and individuals with a lot of money behind them, philanthropists funding organizations to bring an end to hunting worldwide. It's everywhere. They're big, they're well funded, they're well staffed. They got strategies. They're thinking, 5-10 years out in front of us, and they play the look at how horrible these people are game, right? There's all these, derogatory, psychopath, kill for fun, all this kind of stuff that's associated with it. And so there's a narrative that's being engineered to change social perceptions of hunting, and that's a big part of what we're trying to do, Blood Origins Canada and Blood Origins worldwide, is to get control of that narrative and show who hunters really are, what they really they do, and what hunting brings to communities. But it's a David and Goliath model out there in the world, and it's hard to get hunters in this country to financially back programs like ours, or to actually get involved enough and fired up enough, like the anti-hunter organizations do. It's an order of magnitude different in the amount of passion of people that want to stop hunting and make hunters look bad versus people that want to keep hunting and show how hunting is actually good and hunters are good people. It's scales are just completely, tipped there. So, on occasion, we don't do ourselves any favor. And there are cases, and happens every year, cases of, poaching, conviction. We had one here not that long ago in the early spring of a TV celebrity based, in BC, that got a bunch of poaching fines and stuff. And that stuff just goes viral worldwide now. And even if the narrative is twisted on it, it just gets out there. It's so big. It's so, well orchestrated. We can't reel that back into the truth, to the facts, right? I think the only weapon we have to fight that engineered narrative that's making society think we're a bad group of deranged people is for people to know hunters and to go, wait a second, my neighbor's a hunter and he's like a really good person, looks after my dog when I'm gone away, gives me some deer sausage, whatever. So I'm not buying that, on the headlines of the news story or whatever.
It's an uphill battle. And last stat I read was it something like over 300,000 hours a year are donated by hunters to fish, wildlife, and habitat projects. And that's everything from willow hinging, planting stuff in riparian areas. Up here in Prince George, the Spirit City Wildlife does an incredible brood capture with the salmon stocks, all on a volunteer basis. The backcountry cleanups. There's just so much great work that hunters and conservationists do, but for some reason, and I guess it's the emotion behind a dead animal, sells a lot better than my kid cleaning up 10 pounds of garbage in her school.
There's hunters are frustrated by this narrative. Like, we shouldn't have to hide who we are. No, we shouldn't. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Hunting, for food, for your family, for the enjoyment of being outdoors. That's all legitimate. That doesn't have to be hid. Then there's the people, well, like, if people are sensitive to that stuff, they're the ones with the problem. That's a great, philosophy to hold, other than the fact they're actually taking that and changing hunting policy and what you can do based on their perceptions.
That's a great way to end it here. So we need to unite as hunters and conservationists and do our part so it's there for our grandkids.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Hey, you bet. Anytime, Steve.